Excuse me? Is anyone sitting in this margin?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. No, I think it's over here. How do you get upstairs? Other steps outside? Okay.
What's some carrots?
No, sorry. So it makes like so this
Good evening, everyone. I'm Steven, and this is Zoe, and we're co-chairs of the Stanford Political Union. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We really want to welcome you to tonight's event. This event is on the economic impact of AI and is hosted by the Stanford Political Union.
So Stanford Political Union is a nonpartisan student organization dedicated to engaging the Stanford campus in civil discussion. We try to look beyond headlines and focus on the details of national and international issues. We are dedicated to fostering debate between students, faculty members, and outside experts. We will have sign-up sheets outside after the event in case you want to learn more.
Now, I'm happy to introduce our student moderator, Anna Mitchell. Anna is a sophomore computer science major interested in the intersection of technology and government. She worked at Neighborly last summer on the technological platform that they have for trading municipal bonds, and this summer she'll be interning on Google's civic engagement team. She is also at Stanford the incoming editor-in-chief of the Stanford Review, and she is a member of the Stanford Political Union. Please join me in welcoming Anna.
Next, I'd like to introduce the first of our two guests tonight. John Taylor is a George P. Schultz Senior Fellow in Economics at the Hoover Institution and the Mary and Robert Raymond Professor of Economics at Stanford University. He chairs the Hoover Working Group on Economic Policy and is director of Stanford's Introductory Economics Center. Taylor's fields of expertise are monetary policy, fiscal policy, and international economics. Taylor served as senior economist on the Council of Economic Advisors for Presidents Ford and Carter, and as a member of the Council of Economic Advisors for President H.W. Bush. He was also a senior economic advisor to multiple presidential campaigns. He was a member of the Congressional Budget Office's panel of economic advisors from 1995 to 2001. From 2001 to 2005, Taylor served as Undersecretary of the Treasury of International Affairs. Please welcome John.
Finally, I'd like to introduce the second of our two guests tonight. Andrew Ng is a former vice president and chief scientist of Baidu, and his field of expertise is in machine learning with an emphasis in deep learning. He has founded and led the Google Brain project at Google, which develops massive-scale deep learning algorithms. He is also the former director of the Stanford AI Lab. In 2011 as well, he led the development of Stanford University's main massive online open course platform and also taught an online machine learning class to over 100,000 students, thus helping launch the MOOC movement and leading to the founding of Coursera, which he was the chairman of. Please give Andrew Ng a warm welcome. And without further ado, Anna, take it away.
Thank you, Professors Taylor and Ng, for being with us tonight. We're going to get started with a really general question. Based on your experiences, how do you see artificial intelligence transforming our lives in the next 20 or so years?
Does this sound on? Okay, great. So we're making this analogy that AI is the new electricity. About 100 years ago, here in the United States, there was no electricity. So, at this time of day, the country would die. Electric lights, electric transportation, refrigeration. And over the next several decades, electricity transformed everything, all major industries. So I think we're actually at a point in history where AI will similarly transform every major industry. And frankly, as an AI technologist, I would love to build a world in which we live in an AI-powered society where you can take a self-driving car to work or to school, and your digital assistant, your computer, can give you advice, and you talk to your house, it just understands you. But I'd love to have AI embedded up and down, making all of your lives better in the way that, just like we don't think about electricity today, but it's transformed our lives. In the future, I hope AI will transform each of your lives to such a point that, like electricity, you don't think about it anymore.
Well, I've been around a little longer. And so I can see lots of change. I hold this little iPhone. I can take pictures of my grandkids. The Kinkos put the picture of the grandkids on the back. I can't imagine doing that for a very long time ago. But I think about the impacts going back. I mean, the fact that planes have automatic pilots, automatic machines that can keep things so safe and automatically. It's amazing. I just came back from Kiev, and it's painless. It's just an amazing thing. And of course, we're going to have that in many other areas. I'm a little disappointed at being an educator that we haven't made more use of AI in education. I think it's an untapped area. And of course, you've done a lot of work on that with MOOCs and Coursera. I think that's still just the beginning. I'd like to see more of that.
Great. So something that's on a lot of people's minds are the economic costs and benefits of this AI transformation. People are worried about job loss and whether the benefits of AI will outweigh the costs of losing jobs. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to it. I think right now, especially times like this where you can see such amazing things happening with AI, to talk about driverless cars, driverless trucks, and all the people who are driving trucks now, you can see them every day. It's on people's mind that there's a cost. I think actually I like to think about the benefits first. It's, in a way, it's like it's an amazing technology, but all technologies have this feature that they've improved people's lives because workers become more productive because of the innovations in the technology. So workers are more productive. Economists call that productivity is increasing. And because productivity is increasing, people are better off. Their incomes rise, and that's just the nature of progress. And so it's a tremendous thing. It used to be this country had 50% of the workforce involved in agriculture. And then amazing technology came, and now only 2%. And where did all the jobs go? They went to other places. And so over time, it's a huge benefit. And I think the same thing is happening now. We can talk about where it might happen. So I tend to emphasize that in the short run, and quite frankly, economics people tend to pay a lot of attention to the short run. They forget about the long. One of the things we'd like to emphasize is the short run and the long run. But in the short run, there can be impacts. The people who do lose their job. I remember used to have, when you went to get gasoline at a gas station, there were all these attendants would come out and fill your gas. They're gone. They're not there anymore. Where did those jobs go? Well, some of them, people retired. There wasn't a job, but others found other places to do things in the gasoline stations or elsewhere. So ultimately, it works itself out. But I think those are the costs. I mentioned one other cost that comes to mind is sort of getting used to technology. One story I used to tell, this is not really AI, but used to be we didn't have automatic dishwashers. There's a story about a husband and wife, and they got an automatic dishwasher, great idea, and suddenly their marriage started to fall apart. And they couldn't figure, why is our marriage falling apart? So they went to see an expert in marriages falling apart. And it said, well, any change in your life? And they thought, well, they didn't know. And we got a dishwasher. Did you used to talk to each other when you were washing the dishes by hand? Yeah. Do you talk to each other now? No, we just let the dishwasher do the dishwasher. So a simple solution, well, just talk to each other while the dishwasher is washing the dishes. It's getting used to the technology, and we have to think about that. It's not easy sometimes to realize how it changes your life.
Richard, I think that as an AI technology lead, until recently I was leading a large AI team at Baidu, and I've had these funny experiences where I lead an AI team into, say, a call center, and we sit and interview these call center operators, or telephone call center operators, do a deep dive, understand them, understand what they do with their jobs, and I would come away with this conviction that my teams can write software to automate a very large fraction of their job with this person sitting across from me. It turns out that a lot of call centers, maybe 30% of the inbound phone calls are to request a refund, and we can probably write software to automate that. Or actually, I bet that most university help desks, like the IT help desk, probably I would guess something like 20% of the inbound calls are for help me set the password. And as an AI technologist, I know how to write software to automate that. So I've had these very funny experiences sitting across the table from someone, interviewing someone to learn about their job, and knowing that my teams can go home and spend several months to automate away a large fraction of their jobs, and that this will probably affect the employment of some of these individuals I've gotten to know face to face. I think some of the political debate in the United States has been about how much wealth we've created. There's the East and West Coast EVs, right? We've certainly created a lot of wealth on the coast, but I think the coming job displacement will be so fast that rather than, I think John mentioned the agriculture. When the tractors came and the farming jobs went away, that happened over a span of many decades. And so the farmer's son or daughter could learn a different job, and the farmer could farm until they retired, but their children had to go to university and learn a different trade. I think one thing that's very different now is the world is so connected, and we are so good at having an invention and scaling it all across the country, all across the world so quickly. There are a lot of people whose jobs, that are doing jobs today that will very quickly go away. So rather than needing to reskill their children for a different job, we need to reskill people that are already alive and working today. Frankly, our educational system has never been built for that. We're not very good at that as a nation. But I think that if we want to build not just a wealthier society, but also a fairer society, then we have important work ahead of us on the education and reskilling of people whose jobs are displaced.
So what kind of jobs should we be reskilling people for, and how can we do that?
I think that digital things, digital online education like Coursera and Khan Academy and a whole bunch of, and things like that are a economic as well as very efficient way to help people with lifelong continuing education. I think most of you are in college, but the old model of education, where you go to college for 4 years and then go to the next 40, that makes no sense in today's world. All of you, after you graduate from Stanford, will need to keep on learning. And I think that online digital education is a good vehicle for that. I think that we as a country should also consider policy changes to support this. So for example, having worked in online education for a while, I feel that motivation is one of the biggest problems of education. It's just so obviously good for you. The numbers show it, the ROI is good for the individuals, good for society, for you to just spend time studying, right? Studying relevant, reasonable things is just very good for you and for society. But if you live, but we're so many people in this country that you live in a family and you're trying to study at night, but your sibling says, hey, why are you trying to study? Come and watch the football game. Like only losers study. Then all your family says that to you, then frankly you will go and watch the football game rather than study. So I think that there are interests. So one concrete structure I think we should consider is a new deal. You know about the New Deal. I think when we consider things like a new deal in which we provide basic income to the unemployed, but make it conditional basic income, in which we pay you to study, because that increases the odds that you will gain the skills you need to re-enter the workforce and therefore contribute back to the tax base that's paying for all of this. So I think with technological displacement coming, as well as fortunately new forms of education that are very low cost and very efficient, I think we need new ways of structuring sort of new boundary or new deal in order to keep this engine of the economy running and to give everyone really, not just East and West Coast, really give everyone a good shot at meaningful work.
Government has historically been very slow-paced and not up to date on technology. how do you ensure that the government is like constantly training people to adapt to new jobs as technology is always changing? And what sort of, like, if you were to implement such a program now, what would you specifically train people in?
So let me pick up on the education part of what Andrew said. I think it's very important, and that's really how I would begin to answer your question. It's hard to know what the technology is going to be 4, 5, 10 years from now. So the best thing is to prepare people to be flexible, it seems to me, to be as knowledgeable as they can. And in any time, people change jobs a lot. That's not a new phenomenon. It used to be an average person's changing jobs 6 or 7 times, even more, in their lifetime. So I think that's what I would say. I think we are, in the United States, failing a lot of people in our education system, especially in K-12. There's some very good places, but there's some really poor places. And it's really terrible, actually. I think we talk about income distribution and people who are left behind. That's a primary thing. I think that the educational technology that Andrew referred to is a way to deal with that. And here, be another kind of a public policy issue maybe we can come back to. I think in order to make people flexible, you have to make policy flexible. So right now, there's an enormous number of occupations in the United States that you have to have a license. Fortunately, you don't have to have a license to be an economist. Thank God you have to have a license to be an economist. And maybe I should say, thank God we have to have a license to be a doctor, because my daughter is a doctor in her first row. But for the most part, we have licensing for lots of things that we don't need them for, to be a barber or various things. So that restricts people's flexibility. You have to get a license to do something. The technology is going to change. And I would like to see some relaxation of those kinds of requirements. Many of them are states. There's thousands of job types that require this. So, and then last time we mentioned about the online innovations, which you have really pioneered in Coursera. I'm very interested in that. I have an online version of my Economics 1 course. It's a very rewarding experience when tens of thousands and more, 50,000, 100,000 people around the world are watching these things. And I'm happy that there's people in China, 50,000 people watching these programs now. We don't know how long they stay with it. There's an attrition issue. But I think that's just beginning, and there could be so much more. And education, unfortunately, is quite inflexible. I don't know if you found that, Andrew, but it's hard to get changes to happen. And the more we can do that, I think in the K-12 area, there's so much rigidities, and people don't want to accept these new ideas when it can be very powerful.
Mm-hmm. So what are the most important skills for someone in high school now or college now to learn to be prepared for this new economy?
I think, I'm curious, how many of you are studying computer science at Stanford? Not a lot of you, okay. Half of what your professors, people like me, are teaching you will be obsolete in 5 years, right? That's just the nature of computer science. But Stanford gives you, I hope, a fantastic education, because with your Stanford education, you're going to keep learning and master the new technologies that will get created over the next 5 years. So I think that this is true for more and more of a society, that what John said, flexibility and the ability. This term called the growth mindset, I personally have this belief that almost anyone can learn to do almost anything. And I think having a really lifelong learning society will enable people to keep shifting the skills and then do the work that society needs them to do. I wish there was a lot. Maybe, depending on which economist report you read, there are a lot of these reports, I feel like something like maybe 30 to 50% of jobs are at significant risk due to automation in the next 15 to 25 years. There's often the reports following parameters like that. But to me, part of the way I read that is that 50% of jobs are at significant risk. That's a lot of jobs. The more positive side of that is, well, maybe the other 50% of jobs are actually not at significant risk of automation. And for a lot of those jobs, not even counting new jobs that they create, but for a lot of those jobs, we just don't have enough people. So I think that there's a huge skill gap problem, but people that are able to learn, there's so much work that we just don't have people to do today. And the society is actually pretty good, I think, at rewarding people with the appropriate skills. So I think the biggest problem is having people with mental flexibility, the ability to keep learning whatever new thing they need to learn in 10 years that we don't even have a name for yet today.
So I should say how many people are majoring in economics? Can't see any, okay. Actually, it's what's been happening at Stanford, which I know best, is computer science has become more and more popular as a major, and most other departments have gotten smaller as a major. We, in economics, we used to think it was just us, economics getting less popular. Well, it's not, it's everybody in computer science getting more popular. And I actually think there's reasons for that. We can see the benefits, but also the computer science department does a terrific job, I think, in teaching and innovative teaching and things like that. But I tend to agree that more breadth is important, more flexibility is important, and somehow you get that by a broader education in the humanities more. So there's now CS and X at Stanford, where you're majoring in computer science plus something else. X is usually humanities of some kind. It's not economics. Somehow CS and economics don't go together. I don't know why that's the case. But I think this idea of breadth, especially when you're beginning in school, is very important. Because the skills, basic skills, I can't say they must be important for flexibility, to have the basic ability to express yourself, ability to do quantitative problems, whether it's coding or just simple logic, I think is immensely important, and that's where the flexibility comes from. But being able to communicate is very important too.
You know, let me share some thoughts about this growth of the computer science major. Oh, by the way, I majored in both economics as well as computer science. But I think that, how to put it, I think that, computer science is fantastic. It lets you do wonderful things. And computer science is often a wonderful careers. I think that the humanities and social sciences and the basic sciences, they're all important as well. I think one of the challenges we see today, and frankly, parents also, Stanford's trustees often ask us, right? Well, all these students majoring in English, all the humanities majors, what kind of jobs are you going to get them? And while the mission of the university is much bigger than jobs, frankly, Stanford is actually a thought leaders of tomorrow, basic research, much bigger than jobs. I think that helping students find jobs is actually also important. I kind of like being able to pay for health insurance. That's actually kind of nice. So I think that at Stanford, especially given the debt that some students leave Stanford with, I do think that Stanford plays a very important role in helping students find jobs. Now, having said that, just even in the narrow Silicon Valley ecosystem of, say, tech companies, there are so many jobs outside engineering. As one concrete example, a lot of companies have a major shortage in product managers. If you plug your cell phone and plug an app, every app had someone, often a product manager, had to make hundreds of decisions about, do we have this button here, is this menu there, if you click on this button, what's the interaction? And there is a shortage in a lot of companies of product managers. It turns out that the best PMs, in my personal opinion, are people that have a very good understanding of humans, of other people. And I think that a lot of humans are actually very good at that. So I think that if your goal is to get a job in the performance arts, frankly, that's a contracting industry. I don't want to be too discouraging. I mean, go for it. But in today's world, getting a job in performance arts is just tough, right? And I have friends that went down that route, and they don't have health insurance, right? That's sorry to be so direct. But I think that humanists, there are so many jobs that humanists are very well suited for as well, ranging from product managers to recruiters to marketing. And I feel like part of the changing role of the university is to teach, say, the dance major, not just how to dance, because it's really tough finding a job being a dancer, although I totally support it when somebody says but to help the dance major use the empathy for people to find, to be matched up with some of these other important, helpful for society. We've had these, actually it's very popular in China, much more in the US, lots of apps that beautify your pictures, right, remove the blemishes and so on. It's much more popular in the US, much more popular in China than the US. So is that art? Or the image style transfer, you can take your personal family photo and make it look like it's painted by Van Gogh. Is that art or is that just imitation? I have friends that used to generate computer-generated music like a couple decades ago. I thought it sounded horrible, but some of my friends thought it sounded great. So I don't know. I come from a family. My mother, right now, my mother is the director of the Hong Kong Arts Festival. So half of my father's a doctor, and my mother attends to run arts festivals. So my family has always had this yin and yang, half artsy, half scientific. And arts is always, maybe we should ask an arts professor rather than a computer scientist.
So I think the technology is amazing, and which is just said as an example of that. But you can't use it for everything. And maybe I'll give you a little example from my own experience. I'm interested in public policy, monetary policy, financial markets, and so a while ago I designed. You could say it's AI. It's a little formula. Algebraic formula for the central bank or the Fed to determine what its interest rate should be. It's pretty nice, little formula. I would be very reluctant to say just use that formula, nothing else. Judgment is really important. Other things can happen. At least you want to look at other formulas at the same time. I think it's true of almost any algorithm, any machine learning method, where you have to somehow check it. You have to have people with judgment who are applying it. It seems to me it would be very dangerous, especially if the stakes are big, to just apply an algorithm without considering a robustness to other kinds of ways of computing it. And so this idea that your training is beyond the computer science, beyond the coding, and you have knowledge of history, knowledge of international relations, the nature of conflict in history and what can go wrong. I think it's really important to be able to use all the things that we're talking about.
So moving back to policy solutions for job loss and automation, Bill Gates recently proposed levying a robot tax to disincentivize companies to fire workers, so it would be a tax on automation. And some EU countries have proposed doing the same thing. What do you think of such a proposal?
I'm not a fan, although he got amazing publicity for that proposal really fast, which is something to think about. No, I mean, a robot is a form of a tool. It's really like a piece of machinery. It's capital. And you're like taxing the thing that can improve people's lives. I think right now, in the United States, our productivity is quite low. We're measuring it right. And it's because people are not actually investing much in not only robots, but just basically buildings and really basic capital. So you don't want to tax that. That's like taxing people's ability to become wealthier or higher income. So I disagree with that. I think there's, to the extent that there's a short-run impact of robotic technology, you should try to find ways to deal with that. I think going back to the idea of having a flexible economy, occupational licensing, other kinds of regulations, if you're going to tax robots or something else, there's less chance you're going to fix the real things that need to be fixed, like the education part. I mean, we should fix education before we think about a tax on robots.
I think in economics, when you tax whatever you want less of, you want less pollution, tax that, hopefully you get less. So I don't see why we would want less automation. That doesn't seem like a great idea. Then you subsidize whether you want more of. So subsidize education, maybe even and tax pollution, but taxing automation seems like a bad idea.
Also on the subject of regulations, recently San Francisco proposed banning autonomous delivery robots. So these would be robots that deliver your Postmates orders or something like that. What regulatory barriers do you see to artificial intelligence?
Let me give an example of the self-driving cars. I think that, say a self-driving car is going down the road. If a construction worker is standing in the middle of the road and the construction worker does that, you need to stop. If the construction worker does that, you should go. This is an absolutely critical decision. The self-driving car had better get this one right. But I don't think any AI technology team today sees a clear roadmap to distinguish between this gesture and that gesture at the level of reliability needed, 99.999% or whatever, in order to make this absolutely critical decision. And so I think there are a lot of cases like this which make me feel that in the near term, our approach to autonomous driving should not be to just make a car try really hard to do everything that a human can do, because as an AI technologist, we could work on this problem, but it's difficult, and our technology, frankly, isn't there yet. Having said that, if we change the way roads are operated, ask the construction worker to just communicate with the car via an app rather than waving at it or yelling at it or whatever, then this actually smooths around the problem. And I think with modest regulation, so 20, 30 years ago, there were proposals like embedding a magnet every 20 feet in the road, right? And that's just too expensive. But autonomous driving technology has advanced to the point where I think with just modest changes to regulations, we can make them a reality and save everyone a lot of time driving and commuting traffic and reduce a lot of car accidents. So I think that sometimes Silicon Valley thinks that government is part of the problem and never part of the solution. But I think that for really innovative technologies, with autonomous driving being one example, it will take a public-private partnership in order to make modest regulatory changes, in order to put the cars on the road with all the benefits of society now follow. So I think that countries with regulatory environments where it can partner with private organizations to make those changes quickly will find a much easier time deploying autonomous driving quickly.
So I think so often the regulations are impeding improvements, and I think that would be an example. Uber has huge regulation problems all over the world. People don't like how they're interfering with the job market, and so that holds things back. It has to be resolved. But I think that to the extent that you can find regulations that provide the ability for new products to come into play without lots of questioning. I mean, there's huge kind of reviews you have to go through for just about every new product a manufacturer introduces. Safety regulations are important, but it becomes really an impediment to getting things done that you really need to get done. I think there's innovative ways you can use AI for regulation too. There's you can make the regulations themselves more flexible. I'll give one example. It's really more in economic use, but there's a question: how do you control CO2 emissions? How do you control sulfur dioxide emissions? Sulfur dioxide is a good example because it turns out it's much more efficient if you have these permits, or these used to be called tradable permits, and that way you have the people who are most effective in controlling the sulfur dioxide applying them, and people who are less effective not. And so it's a much more efficient way to get the same result. In this case, you're using the marketplace, but there's cases where there aren't markets, and you're using computer technology really to design the mechanism to get this more efficient regulation. So there's a lot of things like that that we can do to use this technology to get a more effective environmental control or whatever your goal happens to be.
Let me ask John a question. I'm curious. What do you think of with the rise of, what do you think of the role of antitrust? And do you think that changes in today's technology era?
Antitrust? So I tend to think that the antitrust law, I mean, it's obviously good to promote competition, but frequently it doesn't, and it gets used in the wrong way. So I think for the most part you have to say, I mean, let's take for example just Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1. It features monopolies as a real way to get progress done, right? Because you corner that market, you're doing an unusual thing, but you got a monopoly. You don't want the government to shut that down. That's the reward the person has for the new idea bringing it to the marketplace. So you want to use your antitrust policy or your competition policy that recognizes that, and to really look carefully at whether there is monopoly power, whether prices are really driven up by this. There are again, quantitative measures to examine the extent to which a firm, whether it's a beverage company or a computer company, exercises its market power. I think those could be used more objectively. It's another example where you have quantitative methods bringing in, I think, effectively to the public policy decisions.
Do you disagree?
No, I don't. I'm still thinking about it. I feel like antitrust regulators in the United States have not yet figured out how a lot of technology works and how market power in the technology world works. things. I feel like there is a knowledge gap, which is causing antitrust regulators to be less sophisticated than someone that deeply understands how these things really work, like choose to act.
So should more technical Stanford students enter politics?
You know, you guys are a loud voice. I mean, go to DC, talk to legislators, and speak with a loud voice, because a lot of people in DC, frankly, out there, they're doing the best, a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them. But go talk to them. I find that when we talk to legislators, sometimes it takes years to take action, right? So it doesn't feel like you're having an impact. But I do feel that when, say, organizations like Stanford or technical people talk to Washington, D.C., you know, it does have a very beneficial influence to help them better understand better how the tech world works.
So I spent a fair amount of time working for the federal government in my maybe 8 or 10 years or something like that over the time, and it is sometimes hard to run government. The private sector has huge advantages in many respects. Pay the salary that's appropriate and let go of people who aren't working out that well. It's harder in government, and so generally speaking, that's why it's not as efficient. And so the antitrust people or FTC people you're referring to, just they don't have the training frequently because you can't pay them enough to be at those places. You have to recognize there are certain limits in what the government can do, and keep that in mind. I think that's another reason. I mean, I've observed over time there's seem to be more and more people going back from Silicon Valley to Washington than it used to be, and that's to some extent because the government is more important in the lives of people here. There's more things to worry about, more things to lobby for, and you've got to do that. But on the other hand, there's some, and here's an example which I think is important to make the case. It's related to AI. Financial technology, fintech, is a huge opportunity right now. And a lot of it is using technology. But the regulations really prevent a lot of it. A lot of it comes from regulations that follow the financial crisis. So there's a tightening of various things. So there would be a huge benefit to people in general around the country to fix those regulations, and it would also benefit people in this area who are interested in financial technology, which is a congruence of views in this respect.
This is really interesting. So we're going to move to one final general question, and then we'll take audience questions. So there are a lot of Stanford students here in the audience who are very interested in artificial intelligence. What advice would you give to students who are interested in building a prosperous and more advanced future with artificial intelligence?
You should start.
You know, I think fortunately, Stanford has a lot of great courses in AI. I think it's worth just taking a whole bunch of AI courses in Stanford, and that by itself will set you up to a good career. I don't know. I find that to really, you know, one of the challenges of new technology is that, let's see, when technology areas are mature, right? Actually, for example, computers, you know, let's say desktop computers, right, were relatively mature. I guess now we all have laptops. But we knew that, you know, you could build a desktop, I could build a keyboard, you build a monitor, we'll plug it all together, and then it'll work. But when technology matures, you start to build silos. There's a desktop maker, there's a laptop maker, you know, there's a keyboard maker, with well-defined API, with well-defined interfaces between them. What happens with new technology disruption? And in fact, but if you go back in history, going way back in the early days of the computers, no one knew that we could have one company make a keyboard, a different company make the desktop, a different company make the monitor, because no one knew where to draw the boundaries between different teams. So in the very early days of mainframes, it was the integrated players, the people that did everything. Because back then, who knew? Does the voltage on your keyboard need to be the same voltage as the voltage in the CPU, or can they be different? We just didn't know. So it's the integrated players that could solve problems across all of the different functions that perform the best. So AI technology is changing. It's just, we can do so much stuff now with machine learning that we couldn't do even 2 or 3 years ago. But I think with this wave of technology disruption, we are in a process where we just don't even know where to draw the boundaries between organizational silos. So In Silicon Valley, I mentioned the product manager job, there's a designer job, there's an engineering job, but the boundaries between those job descriptions are changing in the era of AI, and so we don't actually know how to write a job description for a product manager in the AI era. We're actually trying to figure things like that now. So I think with new technologies, it's often the integrated, multidisciplinary players that can solve the problems that involve AI and product and design and operations and marketing, whatever, that win. So I feel like in this era where everything is still unsettled, AI is advancing, none of us really understand how to leverage it to the greatest effect, it tends to be the cross-functional people that know AI but know a bunch of other things as well that I think will be best positioned to capture these opportunities. Not sure that makes sense.
So I think what Andrew says is exactly correct. The question is, what do you do about it? So there tends to be a different mentality if you focus, I think, on engineering. Computer science is part of engineering in a sense. I know it's different. When I went to college, there was no computer science major anywhere, as far as I can remember. Never thought about doing that. Well, electrical engineering, that was the important subject that people studied out, but not computer science. But I think the result is that there's now speaking a little bit as an economist, there's a confining aspect that there's a mechanism, goes from here to there, and in the real world there's the markets that are working and people interacting. And if you don't know how that works, you're going to miss a lot of what you're doing, and that requires these broader subjects, and that's economics is one. But there's many other ways to get that. But it's a pejorative way to say it, but there is an engineering mentality which doesn't recognize. It's like there used to be this idea of the limits of growth, and the technology would not allow more growth, or it would be so damaging to the environment. But people didn't realize there could be something, if the price changed, there could be a substitute for this technology to that technology. And so I think bringing in these mechanisms, these social mechanisms, how people interact, whether it's in a price system or other ways, is an important thing. And I just mentioned one other thing. Andrew and I, we seem to agree on a lot of things here. Maybe that's a disappointment to people. But one thing I think we may disagree a little bit about, I just mentioned, is this basic income idea. And I think that's questionable. I think it has to do with helping people who are hurt by the technology, I think, and as you say, a society that runs better. We have systems in the U.S., welfare systems. We have earned income tax credit. They involve, benefits to working in the ITC case, or an income tax credit, or helping people, families who are needed. And I think we need to work on those more. It has to do with the incentives. And I do think if you had a society where work really wasn't valued at all, it wouldn't be a good society. I think people have to think they're contributing. And part of that is work. I know you don't have to do it if the machines will do it for you, but it would be not utopian to me to see a society where people weren't working and participating. And so you worry a little bit about the basic income, is that you're going to get it no matter what, and you lose that part of the social fabric.
Focus, I apologize for agreeing with you. I do think in the short term there's a very legitimate debate between negative income tax versus basic income, and because depending on the level of job displacement, we might shift one to the other.
Great, so we're going to move to questions. If you have a question, raise your hand and we'll get you a microphone.
Hi, I'm Jackson Moss, and I guess my question is, a lot of your discussion is focused on, in the long term, we change education or make it more flexible, to be able to fix problems in the job market. What about in the very immediate short term, where someone's been a truck driver for their whole life, and they might lose their job from an automated truck? Or someone who's, like 50 years old or something, it's going to be a little hard for them to retrain them. What can the federal government do to alleviate those problems?
Let me tell you the biggest problem, I think, with the seasoned truck driver or the master welder or something, right? I think that with the right incentives and the retraining, that person, person with 30 years of experience driving trucks or welding pieces of metal, in the educational realm, we do know how to train them to be a programmer. So that's actually doable from an educational or ed tech point of view. I think the bigger challenge there is actually more of a social one, which is if I've been welding for 30 years and I'm a master welder, well respected by everyone around me by being so good at my job, and I suddenly go from this very high status occupation where everyone's looking up to me as a truck driver or welder to suddenly, an entry-level programmer with all these Stanford students that are way ahead of me or some whatever, right? I think that's a difficult social thing for a lot of individuals to swallow. I think that's actually a tougher issue, but I'm not sure. I think we just have to run experiments and figure out how to set up the social support structures to try to make that possible.
So one thing, I think it's important not to confuse the impact on the person you're referring to, other people like that person. It's technology, AI, or just the economy, or the way the economy is operating. And it's confusing, actually. People here are doing great. You go 50, 60 miles to the east, unemployment's twice as high. If you go 120 miles to the south, it's 3 times as high. And so there's lots of mixed effects in the economy. I think, to me, the way to attack that is to have a policy that promotes a faster growing economy, which is spreading around. And I think there's ways that can be done. I mean, it's of some interest to me. I don't know how effective it will be that Steve Case and I think J.D. Vance are trying to do some venture capital in the poorest parts of Ohio to try to help directly. That's what the private sector is doing this. It's not the government. And frequently, that helps better. And you look for remedies that offset these costs. You don't want to stifle the things that are benefiting people's lives. Because of problems like that, you want to find other ways to do that. So often, the tendency will be to stop something that's good because of that thing rather than find something else to do with it.
Hi. So I think you've both alluded to the significant position that Silicon Valley holds, both economically and policy-wise, and how important of a role Silicon Valley plays. As a result of that, I think that it's probable that we're more aware of the impact that AI may have in disrupting the markets than we were in the past when it came to the introduction of electricity or the steam engine, etc. How do you think our knowledge of the impact that AI may have positions us to better prepare to handle this fundamental disruption of the market that is impending?
How better prepares us? How prepares us to help others?
Well, us, I meant sort of nationally as a society, not particularly professors.
I think to your point, so there are so many people whose jobs are squarely in the bullseye of my friends, right? That don't know is coming. I don't know if any of you are in, so for example, I don't know if any of you have friends over in the medical school studying to be a radiologist, right? We still have people studying to be radiologists. Frankly, not sure. Well, if someone's graduating from medical school today with a degree in radiology, I think you could be fine for the next 5 years, maybe even the next 10 years. But with the ability of computers to read X-ray scans and CAT scans and all these radiology images, planning for a 40-year career in radiology, I just don't see it. So I think that there are a lot of people in these positions whose jobs are going away. That because AI is complicated, it's difficult for them to understand exactly what's going to happen. So I do think rather than just building products and building these valuable companies, I would love to have us that are doing this work also step up to solving some of these problems in the cause.
So one area which, as I mentioned before, disappointed that there has not been more impact of artificial intelligence. And actually, sometimes I think it's too narrow a focus. It's technology in general we're frequently talking about. But anyway, the area is education. And I teach. and I had done a MOOC. But otherwise, there's very little impact of technology. Still lecture courses, there's very little impact, if I could see it. I don't think Stanford's is more efficient because of that. You think about it, it's amazing technology, but it's the same technique for teaching we had for all these years. So I would like to, especially in this area, you'd think there'd be ways that we could be doing more in that. And I think there's rigidities. I could give a little example of this. When I did this so-called MOOC, I was concerned about the attrition rates. But I wanted to see if you could deliver as just as good as education product online as I could in the classroom with this many students. And so I said, well, how am I going to test this? So I convinced Stanford, but it took a long time. I had to go all over the provost, to allow me to have Stanford students take this course online, but for credit. They had to pay tuition, but it was a regular credit, including incoming freshmen. So we offered it for credit, for tuition, gigantic amount of money for tuition, for everybody. It was very successful because the dropout rate disappeared. You pay your money, you're going to not drop out. You're going to get the course. But it's very hard. They don't allow you to do scholarships for this. It's restricted in many ways. It took a lot of me talking to various people at Stanford to do it. And it's not unusual. I think it's going to change. Recently, Purdue has bought Kaplan, and they want to do lots of online stuff. I'm sure I know there's resistance to that at Purdue, but Ms. Daniels, the president, he's pushing that. So I think there's a sense in which maybe here we could be doing more of that. I mean, Coursera began here, and I just like to see more of that happen. It's so valuable. It's where the area where we could just benefit tremendously from this technology.
And I think that because to exactly your point, I think one example, adoption of mobile phones in the US was relatively slow compared to developing economies because in countries like China and India, there wasn't the established landline infrastructure. So without landlines to compete with, mobile phones could take off much more rapidly. We've seen a lot of examples of this. Here in the United States, with an established credit card system, and because of that, as an incumbent competitor, cell phone payments is taking off much more slowly in the United States than in China, for example. So in less developed economies where there isn't this incumbent infrastructure, sometimes there's an opportunity for the next wave of technology to just take off much faster than in developed economies. So what we're seeing is actually India, for example, has a huge capacity problem in its higher educational system. And so I feel like India has been, parts of India have been moving very aggressively to build universities that really embrace digital content at a pace and speed that feels much faster than I'm seeing in the United States. So for example, there are groups in India trying to train, like order of, let's say, 1,000 TAs so that you can have students watch online digital content and then interact with the TAs rather than hire 1,000 professors, which is just very difficult to do, right? But so I view interesting structures in developing economies that are really building what might turn out to be the next generation of universities very aggressively. So I find that a positive sign. And then I'm sure hopefully in the United States we can learn from those ideas and bring them back stateside as well.
President, you mentioned how the AI revolution differs from the agricultural revolution in the great case. You also pointed out how our education system is simply not built to retrain 40-year-olds. Finally, there's relative certainty or reason to believe that at least at the federal level, investment in education is not likely to increase, as both of you suggested would be a solution. Given this context, I want to ask you how industries have actually fought back against automation, whether it's taxi drivers versus Uber, or real estate agents versus Redfin. It seems like industries are using legal and political tools to slow the advance of automation through regulation. Professor Taylor, this clearly runs contrast to the economic flexibility you mentioned earlier, and it seems to run contrast to pursuing your belief regarding other forms of restrictions in places like ESA. But do you support at all any slowing of AI progress as a tool to handle systemic changes that are bigger than any other revolution you've ever faced?
I think the best solution for society is to let automation and let AI rush ahead and create value, while also being equally aggressive at addressing the job displacement issue so that everyone has a good shot at a meaningful work and meaningful life. If you're asking, if we can't just get us
one of the reasons like to have a higher growth economy, have this technology is you'd be able to do more things with the government could do more things. It'd be more tax revenues. But having said that, a lot of the education things I don't think are so much related to the financing. It's to how it's organized, it's to incentives. And it's especially, let me just give you an example, which I know about from my colleagues at Stanford, Rick Hanishek. He looked at the scores around the country, different states, and for kids in schools in different subjects. And one example is for Hispanics, 8th graders in California, mathematics, next to last in the country. Hispanics, 8th graders, mathematics in Texas are second in the country. The money is no different. It's not a money issue. It's how it's organized, how it's being done. So we need to think about that. What's causing that? I think it has to do with the way the style of education, the fairness, and what's going on. But who knows exactly? But it's an example how you in principle, could do much better with the resources that we have in these very important areas.
All right, we'll take 2 more questions.
Good evening. I just have a quick question on, so we talked a lot about how we can influence policy from top down, starting from the government down to the people. But, I spent a lot of time in rural parts of America. I went to Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama. How do we make, we're here at the forefront of innovation, the 1% that's leading everything, so to speak, but how do we make AI relevant to people that have almost nowhere to do with it, not only geographically, but in terms of their line of work? How do we bring that relevance toward them so that we're not just working top down, but also giving the power to the people in a broader scale?
AI is already making almost everyone's lives better, right? I think, every time you do an internet search, you can find relevant information. If you're sick, or your children are sick, and you do a web search and find relevant information, that was AI powering that. Maybe more trade. Every time you fire your email and a spam filter saves you from waiting through tons of emails, and then it just makes email usable so you can communicate with your friends, that's AI. I think that when you use your credit card, to pay for something, the large part of the reason why the credit card system works is because AI is fighting forces to try to figure out if it's you or someone is stolen your credit card using the credit card. Otherwise, the credit card industry will suffer massive losses and possibly closing the apart. So I think that AI, in a lot of invisible ways, is already making lives a lot better for a lot of people. And we still have a long ways to go. I mean, the next time you fall sick, I would love to have, AI help doctors diagnose you and recommend treatment. I would love to have AI play a much bigger role in education to help every child get a personalized, custom tutor education, personal guided path. So I feel that AI is already in the mass market and helping a lot of people's lives. Maybe that's the more positive side of AI beyond the job displacement that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's easy to miss things like that because they become so routine. So again, I'll give you an example. I've always been very hard of hearing. So I would not be a professor if it wasn't for the technology of hearing aid. Sometimes I take my hearing, I can't hear a damn thing. And it's a simple innovation. But here it's completely changed my ability to function as a person. And we forget that. And there's all sorts of things around that we shouldn't forget when we look at the cost and benefits.
Hi, thanks a lot for the thought-provoking conversation so far. My name is Lisa Wang and I work on AI in education. And I have a question about the education and staying flexible. So both of you mentioned the importance of education for the new workforce and to be able to pick up new skills. However, most online courses practice and teach very specific skills or very specific concepts. So I was wondering, how would you teach flexibility at scale? Thanks.
How do you teach flexibility? From teaching economics is what I teach. The most important thing is to show how markets provide an enormous amount of flexibility. You have experiments, students participate, buying and selling. You have examples in history. You have, take China moved towards markets, and a billion people came out of poverty because of the flexibility from the markets. So there's just so many things. I actually sometimes dream the machine learning couldn't make it obvious to people why markets and that system, capitalist system, whatever you call it, market-based system, it works better. And there's just so much evidence. So, and it's flexibility. It's got the right role for government to make sure that there's a good rule of law. A rule of law is huge for providing flexibility. It protects people's freedom. Freedom is part of that flexibility. You can work where you want. You can buy what you want. If you're a firm, you can hire who you want. And those are all part of the flexibility that so hard to teach actually, because people experience it, but they can't see it so much. So try all sorts of devices, people participating, watching real markets. But it's a very good question of how you portray or convince people about this very important aspect of a flexible economy.
Yeah, let me tell you how I teach PhD students to do research, right? Which is, say you're a first-year PhD student, you maybe haven't written any research papers yet, you want to know, well, how do I come up with my own novel ideas and create novel research? Is there a systematic process of doing that? Turns out there is a pretty systematic process for teaching people to come up with your own ideas and do your own novel research, which is read a lot of research papers and also try replicating existing results, at least in computer science. And it turns out that your brain, the human brain, is a wonderful thing. When you've read enough research papers, I don't know if it's going to be 20 or 50 or 100, not 1,000, but you've read enough research papers and replicated enough results published in literature, your brain, almost magically figures out how to write the next paper that's not yet been written yet. So this is actually a very repeatable process. If any of you want to learn to be a computer science researcher, this actually works very. I would guess it works in other disciplines as well, but I have this experience. So I think teaching individuals to be flexible. I don't know what I'm about to say is well backed up by strong pedagogical science, but I think the human brain is actually remarkable. By the time we've taught you, how to solve a problem in 5 contexts, there's a pretty different, taught you 5 programming languages or whatever, there's a pretty good chance that your brain will figure out what it takes to do the next one. So I think I'm optimistic by teaching people a lot of these examples that can get people to then, have human brains is a wonderful thing to learn to generalize the next example.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. And thank you, Professor Taylor and Professor Ng.